welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 543. And today's date is December 16th, 2014. And the title of this episode is Central Banker's New Angle Blames Syria for the Rise of the Islamic State to Invade. This right here is nothing new. We understand the goal of the U.S. government, the central bankers, has always been the same. It has not changed whatsoever. The only thing that might have changed is the tactics they're using to get into Syria. And if we go back in time, we realize that they've been doing this for quite a while, because as we understand that General Wesley Clark came out with a list of all the countries the United States government central bankers were going to invade. Syria, Iran, pretty much last on the list. Here we are in Syria, and they want to remove Assad. They want to set up a puppet government, and they want to put all the natural resources on the dollar, set up a central bank, and then eventually go into Iran. This is their entire goal. They thought they were going to do this to every single country in the Mideast and North Africa. They pretty much have, but it's starting to backfire, because we're seeing a lot of the people in these countries, they are rising up, they want their countries back, and this is turning into a big problem. But they're going to keep on course, and we can see going back to August of 2013 when we had this chemical weapons false flag event where the President was out there, John Kerry was out there, letting us know that yes, Assad used chemical weapons on his own people. And of course, it didn't make sense at that time, because Russia, President Assad invited the UN the Security Council into Syria. They put him up at a hotel, and a day later, all of a sudden, there was a chemical weapons attack. It made no sense. Why would he invite these officials into the country and then do a chemical attack? It makes no sense whatsoever. Then we find out that no, it was not Assad. It was the Free Syrian Army. MIT did an experiment of the trajectory of the missile, and it was impossible to come from the Assad forces, but it was very possible to come from the Free Syrian Army where they were located. And we can see right now the Free Syrian Army did have sarin gas. They have no problem using this weapon on the people of Syria. Why would the president of Syria use it on his own people? It would make no sense, especially when there are UN officials inside the country. So that completely fell apart. Russia brokered the peace deal. The United States government central bankers were almost ready to invade, but what happened was Russia stepped in, negotiated a peace deal. If we remove all the chemical weapons from Syria, will this satisfy the United States government central bankers? They said, absolutely yes, this will satisfy us completely. Then what happened? We had the Geneva II talks in 2014. We had the opposition. We had the Syrian government come together. And of course the United States government was backing the opposition, the Syrian opposition. The only thing that was on the agenda for the opposition and the U.S. government was for Assad to step down. There was nothing else on the table. That was it. Syria, the opposition, never met on anything whatsoever, because Assad was not going to step down. Then we realized there was an election back in July, and they were predicting that the people were not going to vote for Assad, and everyone came out and voted for Assad, and he was elected president. And at the same exact time this was going on, we had more forces in Jordan training to go into the Free Syrian Army and fight Assad. But this completely took a different direction, because this was not working. So they decided to have this group renamed, called the Islamic State. They were trained, they were given weapons, and they were maneuvered into Iraq to cause chaos and to say they're creating a caliphate between Iraq and Syria. And we can see this is where we are today, where the United States now has gotten into Syria, has gotten into Iraq, and right now they're just bombing. Who are they bombing? Well, it's not the Islamic State. They are bombing the infrastructure of Syria. They are bombing the people in Iraq who are rising up. And the last thing they need to do is put boots on the ground, set up a no-fly zone, and they're trying to figure out any way they possibly can to get into Syria. They've changed their story many, many times. They had Caesar, this person who was in Syria who took pictures in a hospital showing the torture. But again, These people were in the hospital. We have no idea where they came from. Were they tortured? Who knows? But again, now the government says torture is fine and it's okay to torture people. So how is this argument going to play out? Not very well. Then we had another instance of saying that Assad was using chlorine gas at the same time they were removing the chemical weapons. That made no sense either. We also had Assad was hiding chemical weapons in the Alawite section of Syria, and that turned out to be false also. So now they're using another story. They're using the story that Assad created the Islamic State. He fostered the Islamic State. He's in line with the Islamic State. And this is what they're using to get into Syria. And we can see already with the Lone Wolf Group attack in Australia, this false flag event, this is starting the propaganda to show that, yes, this is where terrorism is from. We need to get into there, and the only way to defeat them is to put boots on the ground. I don't care what the President Obama, his administration is saying. We see already by the actions of Kerry, we see from the Congress, we see exactly what they're doing. They are preparing to go to war with Syria and to put boots on the ground. Again, every time a government official is out there and they tell us that, no, we object to boots on the ground, you can be assured that yes, boots will be going on the ground in Iraq and then eventually in Syria. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, out in Europe, we understand that these countries are having a very rough time. They have so much debt, very high unemployment, very high youth unemployment, and right now we see Eurozone businesses are ending the 2014 year with weak growth, and firms are still cutting prices to encourage trade. Overall, it's a very disappointing picture of weak Euro area, weak growth, and deepening concern that plunging oil prices may send the Eurozone into a deflationary spiral will push the ECB to buy sovereign debt early next year. And we can see right now that things really aren't getting better. I understand they're pushing the oil prices down, making gas much, much cheaper. It's affecting a lot of the countries around the world, especially Russia at this point. But it's used for many different agendas. They're trying to get the people out there and spend their money. But we have to understand most of the people, they just don't have work. And those people who are being laid off are finding this out, that there is no work out there. They're taking part-time jobs. They're going on unemployment, and they are saving their funds. Those people who are out there who have been in the workforce underemployed or no employment whatsoever, they're not taking their extra money that they have from fuel, because when you have no money and you're just bringing enough to survive, there really is no extra money. And anyone in that situation understands that. The people who are bringing in tons and tons of money, they really don't understand what it is like to have a few extra bucks. And when you do have a few extra bucks, you don't go out and spend it on frivolous things. You purchase food, you purchase clothing, you purchase you pay your bills like electricity, gas, things that you're behind on, or you go to the gas pump and you put a little bit more gas in your car so you can drive more places. And we can see right now from yesterday, manufacturing, the Empire manufacturing was down. Now the U.S. manufacturing PMI collapsed to 53.7 in December, missing expectations of a rebound of 55.2 by the most on record, and falling to its lowest since January 2014. This is the fourth monthly drop in a row off the mid-year. The employment sub-indexed dropped to its lowest since July, and new orders collapsed to its lowest since January. This comes on the heels of Germany's 18-month lows for its manufacturing PMI. And we have to remember that all of this manufacturing links up pretty much to the Baltic Dry Index, and we have a new report that it has fallen once again. Yesterday we said it was around 873 points. It has fallen now to 845 points. And we have to remember that back in 2008, during that period, right before the recession, the Baltic Dry Index was at 11,793, and it fell to its lowest point in 2012 to 647. So it decreased all throughout that time period. And now we see that the Baltic Dry Index is reaching that same exact number. We are pretty much in a depression. Basically what they're doing is they're manipulating all the numbers, trying to convince us that everything is absolutely fine, but we know better. We're looking at real economic indicators every single day, not the government manipulated numbers, and we're starting to see a pattern form where everything is starting to really decline and fall apart. The housing permits, as we know, real estate is completely falling apart. And of course, the corporate media, the government, they're all out there saying this is normal in a recovery. Everything starts to decline and soften, and then all of a sudden we have this major recovery. Well, maybe if they pump it up with free money, with giving mortgages to anyone that has a heartbeat, with 0% down payment, yeah, you can pump it up for a while, but garbage in, garbage out. Housing permits tumbled 5.2% month on month. This is the biggest drop since January. Permits dropped in all regions except the Northeast. Housing starts dropped 1.6 month on month. The South was the only region with a rise in completions as the Northeast was cut in half and both single and multifamily residents slid. Both starts and permits miss, with forward-looking permits signaling notable weakness ahead in the real estate market. And we can see that, yes, it is falling apart, and real estate is not going to be getting better anytime soon. Yes, we might see a bump up in the start of the year. I wouldn't even say in the winter, in January, February, even though the Freddie and Fannie Mac, Fannie Mae, they're introducing a new law where people only have to put down 3%. If you have a heartbeat, you can get a mortgage. I think we'll see the bump in spring. I don't think people will be running out, but I think it will be too late at that point in time. And whatever bump we see, it's going to be so tiny, it's not even going to be worth even mentioning, because the declines before that time period are going to be sharp, and it's going to completely fall apart, because the only people that are buying these homes are hedge funds, investment companies, and foreigners who are coming in with cash and buying the houses in cash, sitting on them, waiting for the values to go up. But what we're seeing right now is that the values of homes are declining, and they're going to continually decline. Now, we've always said that China and Russia, they're eventually going to start dumping treasuries. They have dumped a little bit each couple of months, and we're seeing that they're continually doing this, and they're dumping even more. October Treasury International Capital Report is that in October, foreigners sold a whopping $27.2 billion in U.S. equities, surpassing the dump just after the first taper tantrum, when they sold about $27.1 billion in June of 2013, when they also sold about $40.8 billion in treasuries. China and Russia dumped U.S. treasuries in October, some $14 billion and $10 billion respectively, in the process sending China's total treasury holdings to about $1.2 billion, the lowest since February of 2013. I should say $1,253 billion, which is $1.2 trillion. As for Russia, after selling $9.7 billion in October, a process which certainly continued in November, its latest total is just about $108 billion, or just modestly higher than the $100 billion hit in March after the Ukraine conflict first broke out, and the second lowest total Russian treasury holding since 2008. For a long time, China and Russia have been warning about selling the treasury bonds, and we can see right now there are no more warnings. They are just dumping them right now. Now, as we know, the ruble is completely falling apart. It is plummeting. It lost more than 20% in a day, hitting a new dollar and euro lows. The Russian ruble, which slumped to new record lows against hard currencies, continued to fall today, even though Russia tried to hike the interest rate of 17%, which failed to halt the ruble's landslide tumble against the hard currencies. The rate increase only calmed the ruble temporarily, but it started falling once again. And we can see right now that this is being done on purpose. They're putting a lot of pressure on Russia. They want them to get out of Ukraine. They want them out of the southeastern region. They want them out of Crimea. They want them out of Ukraine completely. They want them to have nothing to do with it, and they're going to continue with this pressure on Russia right now. And we have to watch what Putin is going to do, and we can see they want him to do something stupid like maneuver into Ukraine or start a war or do something else. But as we know, Putin is too smart for this. He's looking at the situation and realizing what is going on here. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Tuesday he has serious reasons to believe that the United States is attempting to change the regime and destabilize the situation in Russia with the help of the sanctions, with the dropping of the oil prices, and putting pressure on the ruble. And we can see this is exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to do it in China with the umbrella protests, and they're trying to maneuver this with Russia right now. Now, the big question is, what is Putin's next move? All the derivatives based off the Russian ruble are in chaos right now and reeling from the massive black swan move in rates. Many FX exchanges have already shut down US dollar ruble trading. And right now, Putin is looking at the situation and saying that the US dollar and the ruble pair will be discontinued due to a recent instability of the Russian ruble. Now, he might even be looking to place the ruble on a gold standard. It might be too early for that, but he might be looking at this point in time. Now, even though all of this is going on, something that people really don't understand is that Russia, I don't think, is doomed. Even though the corporate media is out there saying, oh, the ruble slid. But when you look at this, Europe is sliding, Middle East is sliding, the US is not doing well. Everyone is feeling what is happening there. And given the strength of the Russia is doomed scenario that the corporate media is painting, crude oil prices for Russia in rubles are unchanged since February. This is important as all costs are ruble denominated while revenues are US dollar denominated, leaving Russian oil companies' margins insulated despite the dollar decline in price. In addition, the Russian government is easing the export taxes, which further improve the profitability of Russian oil. So as U.S. shale oil sector is destroyed by its U.S. dollar costs, it appears Putin's core energy industry is somewhat insulated. The last time around the U.S. used oil as a tool to combat Russia was the Soviet Union. On a nominal basis, Brent underwent a correction from over $30 toward the range of $11 to $13, where it remained until the defeat of the Soviet Union and the withdrawal of the Red Army from Afghanistan in 1989. And we can see right now they're trying the same exact tactics right now. But this time around, I think Russia, with Putin there, they are able to cope with an oil route for the near future. Already the devaluation of the Russian ruble means that the oil revenues will be more in rubles than last year, since the devaluation is currently wider than the correction of the oil price itself. And when we look at the dollar, and when we look at the ruble, and we look at the central banks, we have to look at this right now. We have to understand what is going on here. They're all telling us that, Russia is falling apart. Don't invest in stocks, bonds, current, anything in there. The ruble is in free fall, and the dollar is the place to be. If you want to understand the health of a currency, it's imperative to look at the issuer of that currency, basically the central bank. As with any bank, one of the most important metrics is determining a central bank's financial health is its level of solvency. Specifically, we look at the bank's capital as a percentage of its total balance sheet. The U.S. Federal Reserve only has a basic capital ratio of 1.26%. This is down from 4.5% just a few years ago. That means if the value of the Fed's assets declined by only 1.26%, the issuer of the world's dominant reserve currency becomes insolvent. The Russian central bank ratio is 12.5%, literally almost 10 times greater than that of the Fed. capital cushion is crucial because when the unsuspected happens, this is what can help keep you afloat. Another important metric is gold. As mentioned many times before, the Fed has no gold whatsoever. They don't own gold. Yes, they have paper certificates where it's leased out, but they do not own it. Russia owns gold, and they've been adding to their gold reserves over and over and over every year, bringing it up higher and higher and higher. So nothing backs the dollar, and Russia has gold. So we're going to have to see how this plays out, and we're going to have to see what Putin's next move is. Now, as we know, the spending bill is sitting on the president's desk, and it includes many, many different things. One of them is sanctions against Russia. Now, Obama said he was waiting for Europe to impose sanctions on Russia, but it looks like he does intend to sign the Russian sanction legislation. They want to put a little bit more pressure on Russia. Right now, the corporate media is painting the picture that they're reeling right now from the ruble declining. Obama is most likely going to sign the bill before the end of the week, and we're going to have to watch this very closely to see if he actually signs the bill. Now, John Kerry is out there, and he is speaking to Russia, and he's saying, listen, U.S. and European sanctions against Russia could be lifted within days if President Putin makes the right choices in Ukraine. While he praised what he called constructive moves in the last days with the ceasefire and calming the situation, he warned the future of the country's economy lays in Putin's hands, so he needs to make the right decision or will continually destroy your economy. Now, I'm sure Putin's sitting there and he's trying to figure out what to do, or he already has plans in what to do. Again, he is a chess player, and we can see right now that his next move is going to be very, very important, and we're going to have to watch this and see what he does going forward. Now, what's very interesting is, as we know, the spending bill was passed in the Senate and in the House, and now it's sitting on Obama's desk. But Matt Drudge, he was out there, and he tweeted the spending bill was passed because the NSA has dirt on John Bonner. And we can see right now, this is exactly what the NSA does. They spy on all government officials, judges, the American people, and when it is needed, they pull up the dirt on those people to have them do things they normally wouldn't do. This happened with Obamacare, with the judge who was voting if it was constitutional and if it was a tax. And we can see he was saying no, no, no. And then all of a sudden he changed his mind. And we can see the same thing is happening in Congress right now. And again, this is the whole purpose of the NSA. This is why they don't want to reel it in. There's many different parts of the NSA where they're using it to spy on American people, to spy on other countries, get investment advice, get dirt on people, and they use it to their benefit. And we can see this is exactly what happened during this period. Now, as we know, when Obama was pushing Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, he was telling everyone that you can keep your insurance plan, you can keep your doctor, and we found out that this was a complete lie. But what we find out today is that President Obama has deleted his website telling American people they could keep their plans. The Obama administration original government website promoting Obamacare has been deleted on the last day of the Obamacare enrollment period. Uncovered records reveal that the deleted website assured Americans they could keep their existing health insurance plans. Now, even though it is deleted, you can go to the Wayback Machine. If you go to Google, type it in, it will bring up the website that you want, and it will show you pages from the past. And this is how we can see that, yes, there it was, and then it was deleted. And you can do this with pretty much any website. Now, as we know, as part of the agenda of the Obama administration, they are bringing illegals over the border. They want them in the country. The corporate masters, they want these people in the country because, as we know, the illegals can work for a corporation. The corporations do not have to pay that $3,000 penalty from Obamacare. And this is why they want all the illegals in here. And of course, then once they have the jobs, they can go out and get a automobile loan, they can get a student loan, and they also can join up to the military. And they need more and more of these type of people. And they do believe that while these people are working, they will bring in more revenue into the government. But this is really not going to happen, because the revenue that they're making is at a lower salary, and the amount that they're giving in is not going to be that much. Even though the corporations are saving money, they're the ones who are going to benefit from all this, and the American people are not. But right now, the Obama administration is gearing up to implement its controversial amnesty plan for illegal immigrants. One administration official is assuring those who have broken U.S. immigration laws they should apply for their new status without fear of the government coming after them. So basically, his mandate, his executive order, which we can't find still, says that once you're in the country, any agency like DHS, the Border Patrol, ICE, or anyone else will not throw any of these illegals out of the country, and they can stay in this country. Now, Congress pretty much has not passed anything that says, oh, all these illegals get amnesty. Basically, all this means right now is that none of the agencies will take action to remove these people out of the country. And again, they want all the illegals around the country to come up, join up, so they can get their working permits and they can go get work in these corporations. Now, in Washington, it looks like the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, will launch a giant drone hunting blimp over Maryland's Aberdeen proving grounds just east of Washington, D.C. The system includes a 242-foot balloon, technically called an aerostat because it's connected to the ground, that can stay up for a month at a time, and a radar to detect the potential threats of drones. It is also fitted with Raytheon-built MTSB infrared cameras, which could monitor human movement from the air. And basically, I'm going to say this blimp is put into the air to spy on people on the ground. And there's cameras that can go right up and see what you look like, take that into facial recognition, and pretty much go into a main database and search who these people are. And this is why these blimps are really being put up in this area. Now, the U.S. is exploring missile defense sites for protecting against North Korea and Iran missile attacks. U.S. missile defense agencies announced that a comprehensive study for a new ground-based missile defense site on the east coast of the United States is being conducted. A comprehensive study for a new ground-based missile defense site on the east coast of the United States is looking at different sites. They want to protect the East Coast from the North Koreans and the Iranians. But I'm going to say really this is for Russia once we get into war. The 4 locations are in Michigan, Ohio, Fort Drum, New York, and Maine. These are the areas that they're looking at to put missile silos in this region. Now, we understand out in Afghanistan, nothing's really changed out there whatsoever. We know that NATO's been removing their forces, but now they have 12,000 advisors heading towards Afghanistan. We understand the president said he's going to be removing all the troops, but now they're sending 10,000 or so, almost 11,000, and they're going to stay in Afghanistan. And as you can see, as time goes on, more and more troops will be added into this region. Obama declared this week that the U.S. military has reached a turning point. But when NATO's military coalition begins a new mission in Afghanistan at the end of the month, little is likely to change for thousands of troops whose deployment extends into next year. NATO's International Security Assistance Force and the U.S. government have emphasized that the transition from the ISAF to Operation Resolute, basically they just changed the names, everything's the same, marks the end of international troops' combat mission in Afghanistan, as the new mission is focused primarily on training and advising. But defining the difference between the two missions may be largely semantics, and that's basically what it is. It is semantics, because once these troops are under fire, guess what? They're going to fire back, and they're no longer advisors. So basically, they have the same thing, and they tried to convince everyone that they were removing all these troops, and the only reason they were doing that is because President Karzai, who's no longer in office, wouldn't sign the bilateral security agreement giving immunity to the soldiers. But the new president, of course, with the help of John Kerry, got elected, and he signed the bilateral security agreement, which gives the U.S. and NATO troops immunity, and this is why all these troops are staying, and they will never, ever leave. Actually, they'll be added on to probably in 2015. Now, Biden is out in Ukraine, and he's saying that right now the United States will grant $10 billion for financial support to Ukraine. And the $10 billion is needed in order for Ukraine to avoid a default, as its economy is pretty much falling apart and collapsing, and it is getting worse and worse and worse. And Yatsenyuk is out there looking for loans from the IMF, from Europe, and the United States. And it looks like people are bringing in the money to keep Ukraine afloat. And of course, they are preparing for a major offensive. We can see Poroshenko even admitted this time for the ceasefire allows him to reinforce his troops, to bring in the lethal weapons, which the United States and NATO are now delivering to those closed Air Force, those closed air bases or airports. The flights are coming in, cargo is being unloaded, and these are going to be all new lethal weapons for the Ukrainian military to go after the southeastern section and then eventually go after Crimea. And meanwhile, while all this is going on, they're going to continually keep the pressure up on Russia to make Russia fold, because they want Russia completely away from this, and they want Russia to return Crimea and tell the southeastern people, listen, stop fighting. You're now part of Ukraine. This is it. And this is what they've been trying to force, and they're going to continually try to force this, and we'll have to watch this very carefully to see how this turns out. Now, Ukraine and the EU, they are planning to sign an agreement on a common aviation area in 2015. The European Union and Ukraine plan to sign this agreement. It is an important part of the EU-Ukraine transport agenda. So we can see right now the EU and Ukraine are becoming very, very close. And as we know, Ukraine is becoming an ally of NATO, and they're pushing the agenda as hard as they possibly can to set Ukraine in the proper positioning to pretty much go after the regions. And again, the central bankers did not get what they paid for. They paid for the entire country, and they're not just going to walk away from it and say, okay, you know what, Russia, you have Crimea. Russia, you have the southeastern section. We'll be happy with the southwest, with no production, with no ports, with absolutely nothing. They're not going to do it, and this is why we see all of this happening right now. Now, we understand there is a ceasefire. The self-proclaimed Donetsk people said they were ready for peace talks, but Kiev is disrupting them. Contact Group on Ukraine was to have, they were going to hold a Skype conference on December 10th. The minister said that the Ukrainian side failed to get in touch with them, and later ex-Ukrainian President Leonid Kuchma claimed there was allegedly unending shelling, and actually there was no shelling that day whatsoever, and they just didn't want to hold the talks with the Donetsk people because, again, they don't want peace. They're going to go into that region full force with the new lethal weapons and the newly trained troops. Now, we understand out in Ukraine that the EU, the United States government, central bankers, they want Crimea back. The European Union right now is pretty much putting in new restrictions in the area of tourism and investments to Crimea, and they're going to come into force by the end of this week. So they're putting a lot of pressure on Crimea, which is part of Russia now. There are sanctions on Russia. They're trying to demolish the ruble. They're doing everything that they possibly can to have Putin say, okay, I give. Now, we understand NATO, the United States, is always out there saying that Russia's flying their jets very close to our borders, and of course they're in international space, airspace, and they're just using this as propaganda. And right now what we see is that NATO tactical aircraft double flight intensity near Russia. Tactical aircraft of North Atlantic Alliance states more than doubled flight intensity near the borders of Russia and Belarus this year. Overall number of flights by NATO tactical aircraft in regions bordering Russia and Belarus has more than doubled to exceed 3,000 in 2014 against 2013. And we can see that this is continually happening over and over. And you know, it's the same thing that Russia's doing. All countries do this. They fly in international airspace. They come very, very close to the border. But this does not mean they're attacking. They're testing the boundaries. And every single country does this. The United States and NATO states have made flights of their spy planes much more intensive this year, particularly in the Baltic states. And of course, the Baltic states are saying, well, Russia's coming very close, so we need to do this. And we can see this is all propaganda to demonize Russia at this point. Now, in the Middle East, we understand the people are rising up in Yemen, in Libya, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and it's a complete mess. Right now, the people in Yemen, they are preventing the new Yemen army chief from entering the defense ministry on Tuesday in a fresh show of power. And they're saying that, you know, the president is promoting corruption in the country. They want the government out. They want the U.S. to stop meddling in Yemen. And we can see this is definitely spreading. It's spreading in Yemen, in Libya, in Lebanon, Iraq, and the central bankers, the U.S. government, they know this. They know eventually they will have to go into these areas. Now, the Islamists, or the people of Libya, have launched an airstrike near the oil terminals in eastern Libya, stepping up a battle for the government-held facilities. It was the first time that the Libyan people carried out an air raid on the oil region. The Libyan oil belongs to the Libyan people and should not be manipulated by any group, and this is coming from the people of Libya, and they're absolutely right. We have huge amount of manipulation of oil, and who's that coming from? The United States government, the central bankers, because they want it all on the U.S. dollar. They want the oil only sold on the U.S. dollar, and this helps keep the dollar propped up. And right now, we can see the people in Libya are really pushing the agenda, trying to get these oil fields, because eventually what they want to do is they want to sell this not using the U.S. dollar. Now, it looks like Syria and Iran, they're having official talks. The primary objective of the talks and meeting between both sides is to develop new work mechanisms that will lead to a further enhancing communication and the standing bilateral coordination on all levels. The talks are about boosting Iranian investment activities in Syria, including in the fields of oil, industry, agricultural, banking, and tourism, broadening the scope of trade between the two countries. They are coming closer and closer together. We also have to remember they have an agreement. If Syria does go into war, Iran would back Syria. And we can see that, yes, this is definitely happening. Now, in my other reports, I talked about how the U.S. is cutting off the payments to the Free Syrian Army. And when I started to think about this, we have to understand what's going on here. A lot of the payments have stopped because we have to remember that Russia, Syria, and the Syrian opposition are in peace talks right now. And guess what? The United States government, they don't want peace. The central bankers, they don't want peace, so they cut them off. Those people who are having peace talks with Russia and Syria, they are no longer receiving payments right now. And again, they do not want peace. They don't need this group anymore. They're training new soldiers. They have the Islamic State, which is the proxy army, and we see they are ready to make their move very, very soon. Now, it looks like a new video circulating purports to show that Al-Qaeda linked group has an anti-tank weapon that may have been intended for more moderate factions in the conflict. Well, no. Basically, Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, and the Free Syrian Army, they're all one and the same. There is no moderates. There is no Al-Qaeda. That's all one and the same. And the United States government central bankers, they gave the weapons to the group. And of course, when they got caught saying, hey, how come Al-Qaeda is in this group? And how come we're supporting Al-Qaeda? They say, oh, no. Those people we're not supporting. We're only supporting the moderates over here. But they're all one and the same, and they're trying to explain this away. Now, the West is angling for a new pretext to step up the war with Syria. And what are they saying now? Well, that Damascus government, President Assad, was the main driving force in the creation of the Islamic State terror network. The Syrian government of President Assad is to blame for the rise of the Islamic State. The report headline, ISIS, the inside story, informs readers that around early 2009, the Syrian government gave the group crucial help in ramping up its insurgency in Iraq. The main source of the story, we are told, is the Islamic State senior commander, where he's out there trying to tell everyone, yes, President Assad helped us. He brought us into Damascus and he set us up, which is absolutely fake, phony, and false. This is not what happened. As we can see, the U.S. government, central bankers, Israel, UK, and other Arab nations, they're trying to create some type of story, propaganda that will stick. They're trying to convince everyone. And from the lone wolf group in Australia, they're trying to push the agenda again further and further, and we'll have to see if the corporate media picks this up. If it starts to stick, they will then run with it. And they need some way of getting into Syria by putting boots on the ground, and we see they're making a play and using this propaganda. Now, as we know, out in Australia, we had Haran Monis. He's the one who was holding the people hostage. Of course, he died. But there are 5 reasons to question the official story. Haran Monis is Shiite, not Sunni, while the mainstream reports may suggest that Monis is yet another Islamic State-style terrorist that finally attempted to rise and meet his destiny by engaging in terrorist attacks in the West. There are a number of problems with the presentation in terms of details. Western media reports that among the ludicrous demands, Monis requested to be provided with an Islamic State flag. Now, why would he do this? It makes no sense whatsoever. Why would the Shiite cleric request an Islamic State flag? It has nothing to do with him whatsoever. Of course, this was for propaganda purposes. Number 2, Monis is a liberal Muslim, a fundamentalist Muslim. Nearly 10 years ago, Monis was presented as a liberal Muslim, preaching a brand of tolerant and mainstream Islam. Since 2013, however, Monis has been presented as both a murderer and now a terrorist. Number 3, he served U.S. NATO West interest as propaganda tool against Iran. Before he became the star of Sunday evening, Monday morning news, he served as a convenient agent of propaganda against the government of Iran, itself a major target of NATO and the West. Number 4, he loved his wife and feared for her safety. Why did he kill her? Notice in his statement above that one of Monis' gripes with the Iranian government was that not only was he in personal danger as a result of his liberal teachings, but his family was in danger as well. Ironically, he stated that his family was being held hostage by Iranian regime. However, fast forward to 2013, Monis is facing charges on accessory before and after the fact to murder his ex-wife, Nolene Hassan, who was stabbed 18 times and set alight outside a Western Sydney unit in April. Number 5, Shiite clerics in Australia do not trust Monis. In 2008, Shiite religious leaders in Australia had asked Australian federal security agents to investigate him and his activities. Federal agents have been urged by the nation's senior Shiite leaders to investigate the Iranian man purporting to be a prominent Islamic cleric. Now, all of this makes no sense. They used the propaganda. They linked it to Iran. They had him ask for the Islamic State flag. This was a lone wolf false flag event. And right now, we can see that this is what it's all about. And the reason why he held up that flag, which was not the Islamic State, this was the message saying that any Islamic can create or push jihad around. This message can fit into the Islamic State. It can fit into Al-Qaeda. It can fit anywhere. And you can see how they're trying to push this very, very hard at this point, because they want everyone to realize that, yes, these people will become radicalized. We can't track them. They're in lone wolf groups. And again, we're going to see many more of these attacks occur. And there is a new report out there that the Islamic State is using scorpion bombs. Militants fighting for the Islamic State in Iraq have unveiled their latest terror tactic, bombs containing hundreds of live scorpions designed to spread fear among their enemies. Canisters packed with poisonous varieties of scorpions are being blasted into towns and villages. I mean, really, this is starting to feel like a movie set at this point. It seems like whoever's directing the Islamic State has some knowledge of the film industry, and it seems like this is what they're using at this time. But we're going to see a lot more of these lone wolf attacks because they have to push the agenda. They have to make sure that we understand that they need to get into Syria because Syria is the springboard of terrorism, and now they're using the propaganda that Assad helped create the Islamic State. And you can see how this is all coming together at this point. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.